Hey, I'm Lucas.
Hey, I'm James.
We're Holding Absence, and
this is
our track by track of our debut album, Holding Absence. So track one on the album is a song called Perish. This kind of was one of the first songs we wrote for the record. It was primarily our old guitarist Faisal who wrote it, and I think the main purpose of the song was to kind of have like a kind of live, like we wanted to write something that would just kick you in the face the second you listen to it, you know. So
yeah, it's a song that I think influence-wise we take like quite heavily from Under Oath, in the sense that the drums are quite like Aaron Gillespie-ish.
Yeah, the first verse especially.
Yeah. And I think if you're into sort of classic 2000s post-hardcore, you'll really enjoy that song.
So track two is a song called Your Love Has Ruined My Life. This was one of the songs that quite often when we name a song, it's either I name the song and then I write the lyrics about the name, or I write the lyrics and then I find the name somewhere in the lyrics. And this song, I just thought like Your Love Has Ruined My Life is such a bittersweet kind of statement to make. The song lyrically actually is very particular. The song is about I wrote the song about somebody whose partner passes and trying to live a life without them. So a lot of the lyrics are kind of bittersweet. It kind of shows a lot of resentment towards the fact that love will never feel the same again after this person has left, kind of thing. And the song can be interpreted in many different ways as well. So it's not just specific to the narrative, but when I was writing it, that was the kind of vibe. For that song musically, I think bands like 30 Seconds to Mars, and just kind of like big epic rock really was something we wanted to do. But I think the verses we wanted to make a little bit more, with your bass parts, for example.
Yeah, definitely.
A bit more like subtle. So.
Yeah, definitely. It's subtle, and then it sort of just whooshes into a big like rock chorus. I think it's going to be quite cathartic live for people to just sing the main sort of like chorus hook. It's very much like a t-shirt lyric.
Yeah. So Like a Shadow was to me one of the best and one of the most important songs on this record. Halfway through the writing and recording process, we lost a guitarist, and we were stuck with a drummer, a singer, and a bassist. So songwriting was very alien to us at the time. And Like a Shadow was the first song we wrote. I remember picking it up, and I remember picking a guitar up, and I remember I was looking through like Under Oath tabs, and there was this chord they used a few times, and it was open, open, 5-5, open, open. And I just kind of jammed around with it, and then we sat down with a guy called Dan Weller, who's a good friend of ours, and just kind of made the song a bit more of a single, really.
Yeah,
you know?
Definitely.
Definitely one of my favorite songs for sure.
Yeah, for me, it was about one thing I like. My favorite genre of music is probably punk, and like a lot of my favorite bands like AFI have like typical punk beats. And before that, our old guitarist was kind of opposed to using them because they're very much the done thing. But I was kind of like, we don't have that on the album yet, so. And like when you play it live now, it's just super drive-in, like it's super fun to bop around. I think
bands like Alexis on Fire, bands like Creeper, they kind of, it really, like, we'd never done it before, but to try and make the chorus sound so open, we made the verses sound so closed, you know what I mean? So constant beat, and then just for that drop out, just to explode, you know what I mean? So
that's it.
So You Are Everything was another album track that was written very early in the process. All throughout our kind of career, we've carried the mantra "You are everything," and it speaks in two ways. It kind of says from us to our incredible fan base, like, you guys are everything, you know. And like I think people forget sometimes that without the followers of a band, there would be no band, you know. So it's a good way of us kind of rationalizing our existence as a band sometimes. And another way as well, and this is how I wrote it into the lyrics, is the song is very much about self-worth, self-belief. And you as a human are everything. You are your own universe, and you are the most important thing in the world to you. So never, ever forget that. So that was a big part of writing that song. I think this song's more of like an experimental kind of melodic hardcore track.
Yeah, agreed. I think it's very through written. It's got a huge middle eighth, which is not sort of what you want to do when you're writing a single.
Well, the middle eight's in the second verse.
Yeah,
like, so
exactly.
It's a very like
a weird place to have it. But I think we wrote the record in two halves due to our touring schedule, and we recorded it in two halves. And this was on the first half, and I think it was the first Holding Absence song since the very early days where I listened back and I was like, ooh, I feel something. Because sometimes there's a disconnect between listening to your own band's music and getting the feel, because you spent the time making the song, so you kind of lose that emotional connection.
I think it's hard to rationalize what you've made sometimes, you
Yeah.
know. So yeah, and I agree with James. Like this song, for me, do you know? Fun story about this track. I've never said this before, but when writing the lyrics to this song, the second verse, which is the massive kind of like dialogue kind of all the lyrics, I actually wrote on Christmas Day about 2 years ago, because I remember just sitting there and thinking, like, I'm 20, you know, I'm 22, like, we're trying to write this album, it's Christmas Day, like, I've had all my presents, dude, like, I need to keep cracking on, you know. So weirdly enough, that song for me was something that I wrote that was very important for this album, and I wrote it on Christmas Day. So I just kind of, for me, it was a way of saying that there's no days off, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So Marigold, I guess, mainly falls on me. So when writing this album, we knew we wanted a lot of diversity, and for long periods we wanted piano to be quite a big part of it. We wrote certain songs that didn't make the cut that were like band and piano. But yeah, when we were kind of writing this album, we weren't sure how to add different elements and stuff. And you know, I remember looking back at like A Day to Remember's Homesick album, and how If It Means a Lot to You is a super important song, and there's countless albums in, you know, like Cancer on the MCR Black Parade. You know, I think the best albums have respite and breaks and just times to like rationalize and contextualize what has just gone on before and what will go on next, you know. So Marigold, a poem I wrote originally, and a piano piece that I just kind of threw together, and over time slowly become that song. The recorded version is actually one take of me and a piano, just one microphone or two microphones, one in the piano, one by my voice. So it's a whole live take. So yeah.
So the cool thing about Marigold for me, as someone who wasn't actually involved in writing it, is with our other songs, we would often sit around a computer, overthink everything. And with this song, it was sort of like we were all in the control room of the studio. We knew Lucas had these lyrics. We'd approved the lyrics. We knew that like the vibe was there, but we had no idea how he was going to just do the song. So we all sat there with this first take. And it was actually, I think, the first take that we ended up using, because the natural sort of...
I can't remember which take we did, but there was only two takes.
There was only two takes. And it was the first time we've all just sort of gone, oh, that was good. Like, it was like, it was a nice feeling. I don't know, it must have been...
Yeah, it was weird for me as well, because I was sat, obviously, in a different room. Everybody was in the control room. And I just remember just kind of coming in and being like, was that okay? And everybody was like...
It was
nice.
Awesome. It was a moment of silence where the rest of the band just sort of sat there and just took it in. I think as a vocalist as well, you get picked apart by the rest of your band, especially as like the voice is a little bit harder to like, you know, take criticisms and stuff, and especially when it comes to lyrics. And yeah, everyone was just like, that was great, dude. Like, good job.
Yeah, thumbs up all around.
Yeah.
So I think we knew with this album we had a bit of a quota in terms of like post-hardcore songs. Like I think our sound was something that we defined quite a while before, and we knew what we wanted to do. And I feel like towards the end of the release, we maybe felt like there wasn't enough like heavy tracks really. So this song was consciously written as like a post-hardcore kind of song. It mainly stemmed from James at the beginning.
Yeah. It was a song, again, it was wrote for the second half of the record. Once our main songwriter on the first half, Faisal, left, we had a little bit more room to experiment with things. I had this bass riff that was originally a song I wrote with Ashley, our drummer. It was like a super fast-paced song. It had changed like 5 or 6 times, and now the other day we went through old demos and we were like, oh my god, that was that song now. Yes, that song went through the ringer probably more than
the most, I think.
But I think we're still super happy with the outcome of it.
I think one of the best things about this track is signifies for me now as a listener to this album, right? You know, the album's written. All I can do now is listen. You know, and I always feel like tracks 1 to 5 and tracks 6 to 11 are kind of two sides. You know, and I just love the way To Fall Asleep just kicks. You know, and with the lead line like soaring, it really makes like part 2 just feel like a different part. And one thing we did with this record was we recorded in 2 halves. So some drum sounds are different, for example, some lead tones are different. I think this perfectly separates the two sides, because a lot of the first recorded tracks were at the beginning and a lot of the later recorded were at the end. So for me, just hearing that different drum sound, that different lead guitar tone, it just feels like from Marigold being so calm and gentle, To Fall Asleep just grabs you and throws you on the second half of the record. So Monochrome was the last song we wrote for this album, and we literally wrote it the week before we went into the studio. Yeah, we were conscious of like a shadow maybe sticking out a little bit, you know, and not in a bad way at all, but it was by far the poppiest track. So I think for us, we knew we maybe wanted to explore the poppier realms a little bit more, like we did with songs like Saint Cecilia and stuff in the past. So yeah, we met up with Dan Weller again and sat down and penned the song. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a strange one for us because like I personally loved the song from like start to finish, but I could sense there was a weird feeling of like, I don't know, worry, especially because it's like probably our most hopeful sounding song.
Yeah, it's a major song.
Melancholy.
which is you know.
And sometimes like a song in a major key can sound like contrived, especially like when we've gone from like the darkest depths in certain parts of our songs to then this song that sort of looks back on a time, but sort of.
Yeah. So yeah, and I think Monochrome really has its place on the record, and it really sits in, and yeah, we're incredibly proud of it.
So really cool as well, like Scott and Chris, our new guitarists, had a big part to play in like the lead parts on the song, and I think they created this like super cool like shoegazy kind of, there's an effect on the lead line which sort of is a weird like messy like, I think it's like a really crazy delay, and yeah, it just sounds wicked. I love it.
So Godsend was the first track we wrote for this album cycle. We wrote a Godsend at least 18 months ago, and we actually played it at Download Festival 2016. Is that right?
Yeah, we opened the set with it.
Yeah, so that song predates a lot of everything we've done. It's older than Saint Cecilia. But yeah, so I think when we first wrote that, I remember I had, once again back to the lyrics thing, I had the lyric, God, send me a Godsend. And I had the idea of a track about somebody who was so depressed that they turned to a religion that they themselves knew they didn't believe in to find comfort in their problems, I guess. So, you know, a real desperate song. Yeah, and I think our old guitarist Faisal wrote the lead part, and I just came up with a melody, and it just felt so natural. Yeah, and this song kind of, we rewrote the ending when we actually went into trackers. So that massive outro is quite fresh, but bands like My Bloody Valentine, Explosions in the Sky, like very different bands influenced this track. So
the cool thing about a Godsend is the version you'll hear on the record is probably the best version in the sense like if we'd have never played it so many times, we wouldn't have made like important changes in the songwriting. I think leading on to like future releases that we may do, I think we'd like to spend a lot more time playing the songs in a room together.
So Last Evening Light was written as one of the first half tracks. So it actually, even though it's later on the record, is quite an early written song. And honestly, this song is like emotionally probably my favorite. I think lyrically. So to go on a tangent, the song was inspired by this. It was an installation art piece, and I think it was called, I can't remember. I think it was called like Piece 117 or something. And it was a massively ambiguous like installation piece, which was just a room with a light, and the light would just flicker for 5 seconds, or go on for 5 seconds and go off for 5 seconds. And then I read this massive write-up about how it was symbolic of depression, and how when you're in the dark, it feels like you've been there forever, and when you're in the light, you need to make the most of it because the dark will come again. And for me, that song is hugely about the parallel and duality in life between love, sadness, death, happiness. And I think just by using the metaphor of light and kind of the idea that though dark times come and they may feel like they last forever, the good times come back and they last just as long. And it is not about how long you are in that light, it's about how you are when you're in the light, I guess, and how you kind of make the most of your time while you've got it, kind of thing. So yeah, for me, it's a very powerful song, and some of the lyrics, like, personally make me kind of well up because it's such a raw, personal song. Yeah, I think it's musically a banger as well. I don't really know what else to say.
Yeah, no, totally. It's totally sort of like,
once again, the post-hardcore realm definitely
exactly.
kind of
it's the music we all grew up on, like when we were at our most angsty periods of our lives, probably. So yeah.
Purge, Purge went through the ringer. So Purge started as a track called Poetry in Motion, and it was a piano piece that was written in MIDI, and then I tried incorporating it as a piano piece that would be played alongside the band, and it just never worked, and it broke my heart because I felt like I really believed in the track. And Sleep Token, an incredible band and really good friends of ours, actually recorded the piano part for Poetry in Motion, so a completely different song. And then as we kind of scrapped it and realized it was kind of unsalvageable at this point, we decided that maybe it'd be nice to have this as like a piano piece on its own. And then I kind of felt like this album had lyrically gone through so much that as an overview, it'd be nice to have like a kind of final say and look back at everything that had happened prior and kind of summarize the whole album. So it's very short, it's very subtle, but to me it holds two very important things. So. Cool. So Wilt, once again, one of my favorite tracks for sure. Wilt was the first song we worked on with Scott, one of our new guitarists, and we knew we needed an outro song, and it was a case of we just sat down, and I remember me and Scott, we were like, let's try and do like a fast song with a big intro, and it didn't work, and Scott was like, do you want to try something in 3/4, which is like obviously like quite a swingy, romantic kind of time signature, and it just flowed. It felt like the song wrote itself to an extent.
Mm-hmm. Well, the rest of us were at a gig down the road in Cardiff, and it was a good gig as well. It was a really good gig. It was our friends in Foxtrot and Frown Upon, and Lucas and Scott were like, look, we're not going to make the gigs. Like we've got something. And obviously, sometimes with songwriting, you kind of sometimes stuff just happens, man.
You can't choose
like without calling it magic.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can overthink things to death, which is probably what you did beforehand.
Yeah. We'd spend you spend tens of hours just sitting there trying to write something that doesn't work. And when me and Scott are like jackets on, ready to go to this gig, and then just something happens, and it just kind of rolled off the tongue. I think it's a perfect outro track. For me, it signifies the end of the love in the album that's spoken about very often, and it also signifies just a departure, really. The song doesn't finish on a perfect cadence as well, so it still feels a bit unfinished. And I remember when we were writing, because when we first started as a band, we tried our best to be as obnoxious as possible, basically, like, so as in your face, as bombastic, everything we could do, we would do it too much just to kind of prove a point, And when we were writing this song for the drop down midsection / outro, we came up with it, and I just remember saying to the boys, like, let's just literally just double it, like however long it is, which it was long as hell. Let's just double it. Why not make this a hell of a big track with a lot of emotional kind of weight, And I feel like by the end of the album, let alone the track, it just feels like such an emotional weight has been realized, So, yeah.